Hey, everybody, welcome to Beyond the Cast. I'm excited about my guest, Mike Herne. Thanks for coming on today. You're an infantryman by trait, and the Army brought you to Colorado a couple years ago. But obviously, I know you're in the military, and I thank you for your service. But a big part of like our connection's been the outdoor space. So we've had some conversations over the last few months. You've been on some epic adventures, and just wanted to have you on and just kind of learn a little bit more about you and who you are and where you come from.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me, and thanks for your support.
Yeah, man, appreciate it.
Yeah, what do you want to know?
Well, obviously you moved out to Colorado. You do a lot of stuff at, like, I guess let's start with the Army and then we'll go into the hunting stuff later because I like that. So you told me just a minute ago, you've been all over the world. You're originally from upstate New York.
Yep.
And you've traveled to Italy, you've been in other countries, and let's talk a little bit about your Army background.
Yeah. So, I grew up in upstate New York where the men are men and the sheep are scared. So, there's not much to do in small towns if you stay there. And I was going down a bad path, getting in trouble. I was like, I always had it in me. I always felt called to serve. So I joined the Army, became a paratrooper, and then I've been all over. I've been to Italy, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Fort Benning, Georgia, Colorado, Fort Knox, Kentucky, and then back to Colorado, and then Afghanistan a few times in there.
So of all the places you've been to, I'm biased because I've, native here to Colorado, but what are some of the most, or one of the most beautiful places you've seen?
It's Colorado. I mean, that's why I came back. It's, I am definitely a mountain person and a wilderness person. The East Coast, you can find it in the East Coast, but it's not the same. There's a lot more mosquitoes. There's a lot more bugs. Humidity is terrible. It's the worst. It's definitely the Rockies for me.
Yeah. And obviously I don't want to, break any confidentiality with what you have with the military, but what are probably, some of the best things that you like about the military? And then also in the same note, things that, even, and it doesn't really matter, like just as far as like knowing, like, I know that you have plans after the military, but what are some things that you're looking forward to afterwards?
I'd say the military, like it gives you you get a different perspective from the rest of the world because you get to go to I got to go to some truly, I mean, right now there's not a war going on, but you get to go to some truly terrible places and you get to see the absolute worst of humanity and you get to see the absolute best of humanity. So you got a different perspective on life. You learn, I mean, I learned when I was 18, like life is fragile. It's not infinite. It's not fragile. And as an 18-year-old kid straight out of high school, getting that realization early on kind of set me up to try to live it to my fullest. Whether or not I live into my fullest was always in the best interest of my health. Different story, but there's that. And then the brotherhood. And it's the reason I love backcountry hunting and backpack hunting, because as you get that same brotherhood out there, it's shared. You're out there to accomplish a monumental task. In the military, you're out there to accomplish also a monumental task, but there's a lot of hard work and there's a lot of suffering that happens, and that shared suffering to accomplish whatever that mission or that task is, whether it's kill an elk or rid a village full of enemy fighters, that shared suffering that's where that bond comes from. So it's very similar in the hunting world and the Army world or military world.
One of the things that like stands out is that you mentioned you got to see the worst in humanity and like the best in humanity, which is very gracious of you to put it that way. But I think, what are some of the things that do you feel like that caused some like chain reaction that maybe is like shown up in the last 10 years of your life, where maybe some PTSD, some of the stuff that some of the hardships or things that you had to deal with, and maybe not with people, but even with just being in the military and being in that environment all the time?
Yeah. I would say when I was younger and I would come home from a deployment, because when I first came in, probably 2006 until 2012, I was home, train, go to war for 15 months, 12 months, or 6 months, depending on the trip I went on. So it was go to war, come home, go to war. When you come home, things that might annoy your significant other or your friends that don't have those same experiences, you've literally seen your friends die. You've seen people you love get blown to pieces, picked up parts of their bodies, and you've done some pretty unspeakable things even in that aspect. So when you come home and somebody is complaining because the line at Chick-fil-A is too long, you don't have a lot of patience for it. You're like, there's so much worse things you could be doing than sitting in line at Chick-fil-A.
Right.
And I was married for 10 years up until probably 3 years ago. And that was something that I had to learn because we got married so young. That was something I had to learn when I would come home, not to compare my now ex-wife's problems to problems I face just because my experiences are different. So that was a big one that like took a couple years to kind of get over that and see beyond it. And but that was a big one. And then PTSD, I don't know that I have it. I don't know. I definitely dealt with a little bit of survivor's guilt. I've lost some buddies over there that I think were better men than I was. And I was like, well, why didn't God take me instead of those guys? They had kids, all kinds of things to look forward to. One of them was a devout Christian. At the time, I was a total heathen. So I definitely dealt with that and kind of worked through some of that. Really, after turning 30, like I didn't start really dealing with it until I got a little bit older.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy you're here and alive. Like if no one's told you that or whatever, like I'm happy that I've been able to meet you. I watch you on social media and I see the impact that you're doing in the hunting space, but more than just the hunting space, I've seen a shift, right? Like I've seen a shift. Like we can talk about drinking here in a
Yeah.
little bit, but I think that some of the things that strike a chord with me, like I've never served. I started a family very young and did all that, but I absolutely have the highest respect for men that do. But I had a moment of trying to take my life when I was 17 because I was facing some serious charges, and it turned into this thing where I just walked away, and like God gave me a second chance at life. But I think that when you meet guys that are in the military and they have families and or whatever, like I think even on a lighter note, that there's people that they just feel like they're not enough, and there is that. I don't necessarily call it a mental illness. I think that our society, we get very comfortable with like giving a definition to every single thing that
Yep.
exists. But more than anything, that's just life, right? Like I got two boys that are trying my busting my ass to make them or help them become great men, but they still have their faults. And it's like, how did that happen? How did that slip? And I can point at me or whatever it is, right, for accountability and all that. So I think, what was it like in with some of the men that you served with? Like, I'm sure you saw some of their pain or suffering, or do a lot of those guys just try to keep it buttoned up?
Um, it's in service, it's hard to notice. It's tough to notice because it's fast paced. Like you're showing up to do a job, you're showing up, so you're dialed in, and that's one thing that until probably the last 5 years, that's what I did. That's why militarily speaking, I made rank really young. Um, I've I've had a very successful career, but it's because anything that bothered me or any of my issues, I would just not I would focus on work and not dealing with my issues, like kind of avoiding them. Avoidant would be a good way to put that. So like dealing with the guys that are there, you'll see that a lot. Like really high performing individuals in the office, but then in some cases, not all cases, but the ones that do have problems, they kind of fall apart once they lose that sense of purpose. They're not going in training training for something bigger than themselves. They lose that sense of purpose. And I definitely noticed it in a lot of my friends after leaving the service, the ones that I've kept in touch with. Um, some of them just have a hard time dealing with it. Like I always explain to people, I feel like if you call it PTSD, PTS, whatever you want to call it, I feel a lot of times I feel like the guys that I know that like really exhibit the symptoms of it, I feel like they're kind of stuck in like a trauma loop. Like I've got one really good friend and he's done a ton of work over this last year, which is really cool. But every time I would see him until, this last year, it's like he's still living in 2012
Mm.
and what happened to him instead of focused on, hey man, we're right here, right now. We're at this table. Like, we're living. Life is in front of you, not behind you. That stuff happened to you. You can't change it. It sucks. But I don't know what that mental block is. But I definitely, you can see it big time once they leave.
Sure. Well, I want to reel it back into that later because I think it crosses over more than just military and all that, not taking anything away from that. But so you come to Colorado, you met Aaron Snyder or knew of Aaron because of Kafaru, is the way that I understand it. And then just pretty much submerged yourself in at least the Colorado outdoor community and then hunting community. And now it's like, you've been all over doing a bunch of different events and involved in a bunch of different things that involve hunting. So let's hear that story.
Yeah. So I grew up hunting, whitetail hunting. It's upstate New York, killing deer with single barrel or my first deer I killed was an Ithaca Buckbuster 12 gauge with slugs because you couldn't use rifles up there because of the population and stupid New York rules that come from the city.
Common up there.
Whole different topic. The state is great. The city, terrible. The government, terrible. But so I grew up hunting, joined the military, and hunting was like something everybody skipped school the first day of hunting season. Go get in a deer stand, you'd smoke your deer, back to school, back to sports, back to partying for me. So grew up doing it. Like wasn't the fire wasn't lit. It was just something you did, right? And I did it and I enjoyed it, but I wasn't like hooked. After being in the Army and traveling all over and going to war and coming home from war and training, I got back into hunting when I got stationed in Fort Benning, Georgia, because they have a really good hunting program on the base for soldiers. And so it got me back into it. And I realized that there's a lot of similarities to combat and the challenges that you face when you're hunting. I mean, it's very, very similar. You're scouting, right? We do reconnaissance. We call it reconnaissance instead of scouting. It's the same thing though. You're trying to kill, and you're trying to kill generally an ungulate that is made to not get killed, which is, it's way easier to hunt people than it is to hunt animals. People are super easy to kill. Animals, ungulates specifically, not so much. So that's really what hooked me. And then I grew up with a bow. I shot it maybe 5 times. And after, I'll just be frank, like after being in combat and shooting people and being shot at by people, it just rifle hunting didn't get my blood pumping the same way because it's just didn't do it. But after I picked up a bow and failed a lot, I was like, this is it. This is it. I got my ass kicked. I love it. You have to be so much closer. You have to be so much more meticulous with your scent, where your stand is. I mean, there's so much to go into it that I really enjoyed the challenge. So got the fire lit in Fort Benning. Long-winded, I know.
No.
Got the fire lit in Fort Benning, and then that's where I kind of reconnected with hunting, and hunting out west was never a thought in my mind. And that was around the same, like Aaron was, I think, around that time messing with Brian and the Gritty Bowman, and Cam was starting to have a little bit more of a name for himself. And Cam, I didn't even know elk were a thing. Can you believe that? I was probably 25 and I didn't know, maybe I knew they were a thing, but I had no idea. Right. And I heard an elk bugle on I think it was one of Cam Haynes' videos. And I was like, I need to experience that in person because it sounds like a dinosaur. It's amazing. I still get the same feeling every time I hear one rip. It's freaking awesome. So I changed the course of my career to get stationed out here so I could elk hunt without having to, because being military, when I'm stationed here, I'm a resident. I pay resident prices, even though I'm not an actual resident. Because I'm stationed here, they allow active duty service members that are stationed here resident prices. I was like, how am I going to elk hunt? I'm going to get stationed in Colorado, which to that point in my career, I had grown up in the paratroopers, light infantry, jumping out of airplanes, and completely different infantry, different style. It's mechanized infantry. It's armored infantry. They're not, I don't want to say that they're less than the paratroopers. Like there's tiers of how cool you are, right?
Oh yeah.
Lance is higher up than me. Paratroopers are kind of right below where Lance is. We could talk about Lance so people understand it, right?
Yeah.
You got Rangers, Special Forces, paratroopers. So there's a tier to it. And mechanized infantry is way down here in my book, just because of the way the way I grew up and the Kool-Aid I drank, if you will.
Yep.
So I changed the course of my military career specifically to be able to elk hunt, and then met Aaron and started to kind of find my way in the outdoor industry after that.
Yeah. Well, to touch on Lance, so Lance Banning is just an all around badass. But he's SF Special Forces, right?
Yep.
Special Force guy. I met him probably 14 years ago. He showed up at a Vortex optic shoot that we did for Vortex, and I got to sit in the truck with him and hear some crazy stories and just connect. And for what him and I just like struck a chord, and without giving out too much information, him and I hunted the same area. Like, but he would be the guy that would stay out all night in the freezing cold, versus I'd go back to my camp or whatever. He literally would sleep under a tree with like some sort of parka. Just the level of mental toughness that guy has is incredible. So a little backstory on Lance. I got to get him on here too and talk to his story. Yeah, he's a great guy. For people that most people in the hunting space know the name Aaron Snyder, but for people that don't, that we're trying to touch a lot of people with just human testimony, telling people stories. But Aaron Snyder by far is one of the most lethal hunters, gear reviewers, entrepreneurs, however you want to say it. Like, the guy was a masonry brickworker guy and did some part-time stuff with Patrick Smith. And then you just see the empire that he's grown with Kafaru and the place that he's been able to travel. He's an incredible individual. Happy to call him friend. And, you know him as well, but Aaron's the kind of guy that'll do anything for just about anybody when they're looking into getting into hunting.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a hell of a human.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay. So you hear that, you hear the dinosaur rip. You're like, you're going to change your whole course in the military just so you can start bow hunting.
Just so I can bow hunt out.
So why, other than the passion, like what was the thing that drove it where you're like, I'm going to do this?
The fire was lit. I was into it. I didn't know I wanted to really do any work in the outdoor industry. Like I saw, and I feel like a lot of people, I feel like anybody that gets into hunting, like really gets into hunting, goes through it. Like I saw these people, I'm like, how are these guys? They got these sponsors, they don't pay for anything. How does all this work? Right. So, once I got in, like the fire was lit and I got into it, that's when I started to be like, well, I would like to do this and maybe make it a career or somehow be able to do this as part of my job at least. Right. And so I started thinking about ways that I could do it. And I had kind of seen all kinds of examples on social media. You got an example of pretty much everything. And I didn't want to add to the noise of the talking head Instagram influencers. And I'm just one guy. I don't have the money to pay for a camera guy or do any of that stuff. So I started writing. I like writing. I always got good grades in English, terrible grades in math, but English I did pretty good. So I started writing, and Black Rifle Coffee picked up a couple of my articles, and then it just kind of snowballed from there.
So you still write for Black Rifle?
No. So they kind of, the publication, the outdoor and adventure publication I was writing for, it's starting to go the way of the dodo.
Okay.
Because it doesn't sell coffee. So
right.
That's what I understand of it, at least. But so they're not really doing much with the publication, but I wrote for them from basically probably 2018 until a couple months ago. Got it.
But like the goal for you after the military, it sounds like that you want to do something in the hunt space.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Absolutely.
What does that look like? Have you thought about it?
I'm still, so I always joke, and it's been a joke as long as I've been in. We say that the military is never land, and we're all the lost boys. Because we have no idea what we want to do when we grow up. And we don't really have to know until it's time. So I wear the same thing to work every day. I don't even have to pick my clothes out. They're chosen for me. It's, it's that simple. So I'm not sure yet what I want to do. So I've just kind of been, and I still have a couple years to figure it out, but I've just kind of been adding tools to my tool bag as I've grown and become more mature. So started writing, and then I realized an editor can fix my words if they suck. But if I have really good photos, I can have that absolute dog crap words, but that editor wants to use my photos. So take those dog crap words and polish that turd to be able to publish good photos. So I picked up photography. Um, Dabble a little bit in videography. I don't have the time to learn editing software. I've got the concepts down, but for what shots to get, wides, tights, all that stuff, establishing shots. Um, so I picked up photography, and then now I work with Born Primitive Outdoor. I work on their social media team, so I run their social media, and then I do all their digital ad copy. So any ad copy, whether it's an email campaign or social media posts, I'm cranking out all the written words for that.
Okay. Can you tell everybody what Born Primitive is?
Yeah, Born Primitive is an athletic apparel company, and then Born Primitive Outdoor is an athletic or technical clothing company for hunting. Aaron Snyder, who we were just talking about, is the president of the outdoor line. And so that's how I got my foot in the door. I called Aaron and I said, "Hey, who's managing your social media?" He said, "I am." I'm like, "You should let me do that." And so I'm just trying to get a foot in the door. I'm trying to get my feet wet so I can kind of see behind the back the black curtain, if you will, and figure out what it is I want to do. Cause I have no clue. So,
Right.
but
I think I look at the outdoor industry more as a whole, like from ski and snowboard, hunt, fish, any of the stuff, mountain biking. And there is like that good old boy mentality where it's like, if you haven't been in it or you weren't born or raised in it, like it can be very difficult. Like I remember when I used to be in the snow industry or the snowboard and ski industry, where there was like, I think the Solomon rep was there for like 25 years. And it's like, he had the coolest job. He got to go to all the demo days and got to do all the stuff, where you should, if you want to be in front of people or dealing with potential new customers. And there's a lot of that, like, unless somebody like quits or tips over, you don't wish that for anybody, but it can be challenging, trying to get your foot in the door. But I think also what that manifests, which is kind of like into the next topic, and this is some of the stuff that we've talked about. Like, I would just like you've been in this space already for a few years now. You've been to trade shows, like you've ran hard, you've hustled, which is great. Like I love that about you. And watching that, like, what is your perception of a lot of, and again, this isn't, just so we're clear, like if feelings get hurt or whatever, like, I think everybody, it's always good to get checked, but I think being so new in the industry, like what was your perception of guys that were in the space, that were trying to make it, or you were trying to find a way, like what was your outlook on it?
I don't, so it kind of, it's shifted from kind of when I first got in, I didn't know what I didn't know to where I'm at now. So one thing I'll say for anybody that like sees me on social media, I don't share any, it's social media. So it's a highlight reel. So anytime I'm like real consistent posting on social media, I'm usually doing outdoor industry stuff. What people don't realize, I'm in the military full time. So when you see me doing that stuff, I then like say it's a TAC event. I go work a TAC event for Born Primitive or go work a TAC event for Kafaru. I get off work usually, either drive or fly to the event. I work the event all weekend and I love it. I love people. I have fun while I'm doing it. But then as soon as the event's over, I fly back home and I dump that gear. Some of that gear is still in a pile in my living room floor, right? Just being honest. And then I get a couple hours of sleep. I get up, I shave my face, I brush my teeth, I throw a uniform on, and I'm back working for Uncle Sam. And one thing I've noticed in the industry is there's not a lot of guys with that drive. Like there's a lot of guys that I feel like kind of maybe it was the good old boy system. I haven't quite figured it out, but there's just not a lot of guys with that drive. Or there's guys that have really great ideas, but they can't execute. And then there's guys that can execute, but the guys that can have an idea and come up with something creative and then execute it, those guys are few and far between, and they usually make it.
Yeah. And I think that's like the hard part about the space. I think, when I first got into it, just by the way that I looked, there was a lot of, it was a very, if you wanted to be a professional hunter, it was kind of like you have to have money and you had to either be born into it. Mm-hmm. And anytime there's people that are different or they look different or whatever that means for, whatever, I think you could fill in the blank. And again, I'm not like necessarily playing that card, but I didn't have like this huge profile of like hunting. I grew up doing it with my dad. I started and got into bow hunting later in life, like in my early 20s, and, found a way. I just think that you never know. And like, it's important to keep, well, this being in the
Yeah.
military, like you never know who's going to get promoted or whatever. So you got to be, careful and kind of watch, how you treat people, because there's different seasons of everyone's lives and like stuff that they're going through, right?
Yeah.
Like they might be going through a tough time or whatever. And like I literally have had people say, man, when I first met you, I thought, you were a jerk. And I'm like, well, where did you meet me at? And it was like SHOT Show. I'm like, I have like 30 meetings a day. Like I'm running from one meeting to the next. I don't really have time. That's not my time to socialize.
Hmm.
My time to socialize is more at like attack event for you. When you're at attack event, you're a social butterfly as well, but you're there to work and do everything. You can't just always be, just hanging
Yeah.
out, having a good time. Like you have a mission, you have something that you're trying to do, from when you get there to when you leave. And then you're thinking about, I got to go to work on Monday
Yeah.
or
No,
whatever
yeah.
it is.
Yep. That's
So,
exactly it.
but passion projects though too, even getting this going, like this is a passion project that I've had for years. We had Dan Gates on talking about the whole, trophy hunting initiative. And as I'm getting older, Mike, I'm learning, I'm being humbled a lot more now, but I'm allowing myself to, like, I
Yeah.
think part of talking about ego, when I got into this space, I felt like because of the people I looked up to, and I'm just going to be real, I felt like I had so much to prove. Um, and I think there is that, right? Like in anything that you do, if you want to elevate or go to the next level, there are things that you should prove. There are things that you should do and try to be the best human that you can and perform, right?
Yep.
At the highest level that you're capable of doing. I feel like that you can get lost in that, and I'm throwing myself under the bus and feeling like, a lot of the stuff for me, like the shit just has to stop. And what I mean by that is like, the ego checks or who's repping what brand or wearing what flag, like a lot of that doesn't matter. What matters to me is like hunting and keeping hunting going, as long as possible. Like, well, when I'm in the dirt and, my name's forgotten, like I'm hoping that my kids and my grandkids, they can experience hunting. And there's a lot of stuff that jeopardizes it. But I think one of the best ways that, and a lot of industries do this, you and I know the hunting space, that's something that we have common ground on, but like we eat our own.
Yeah.
And
We're the worst about it.
well, I think there's a lot of
Or
places
yeah,
that are
every
at the
every
highest level.
industry would probably say the same thing.
Well,
Yeah.
at the highest level though, too,
Mhm.
and I think that, through that, you've gone through some stuff that we've talked about personally, and just, you pulled back on drinking. You said that you stopped doing that. You started doing soul seeking in the sense of like, you started realizing like, I got to just surround myself with better people. And
Yeah.
through some of the recent social media, man, I don't want to like, I really don't know you that well or have spent a ton of time with you, but like, I've noticed a change just through your social feed and I feel like it's authentic. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that. Like what happened or, what are you, because it seems like there are certain guys I would put you in this group that like, you're trying to see a bigger picture and how you can make a bigger difference.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah, I just kind of like you, I kind of got caught up in probably comparing myself to other people. Like, oh, what's this guy on social media? What brand? Oh, how'd that guy get sponsored by this company? Like, that guy's a douchebag or whatever. I got kind of caught up in that, and then just it all kind of. I was drinking way too much. I've drank way too much. As a paratrooper, that's what we do for fun when we're not at war. Friday hits. It's part of the culture, right? So, but kind of being real vulnerable and honest, moving from Kentucky back to Colorado, getting a divorce from my wife of 10 years within that same year, kind of started a little bit of a downward spiral. While I was still crushing it at work, still doing pretty okay in the outdoor industry, because that's what I do. I avoid my problems, I avoid my issues, and I pour myself into work. But in my spare time, I was definitely going into the bottle too much, self-medicating a little too much. And then it all kind of came to a head. And as I got sober, and the longer I was sober, the more soul seeking and kind of my ego got me in a little bit of trouble too. There was a period of time, probably a year and a half ago, where I felt like I was entitled to a little more. Again, comparing myself. why is this brand paying this guy, but they're not paying me? Like, so my ego kind of got in the way, alcohol clouding my judgment, all that stuff. So as I started to get clear of that and kind of clear my mind and reconnect with myself, because I was disconnected from myself in all of that because I didn't want to deal with survivor's guilt or deal with this problem or this problem. But as I as I reconnected with myself and kind of started facing the skeletons in my closet and facing my demons, I just realized I don't know when exactly it happened. It wasn't like an aha moment. It was over time, and it took a lot of time and a lot of inward reflection. But I realized like it doesn't matter if I am Levi Morgan, right? I don't need to be Levi Morgan to make it in the world, right? Or to have all the same things Levi Morgan has to make it in the world. I'm just using him as an example because he's a well-known bow hunter and archer. I don't have to have that. But what I do need to do is and if I don't have that, what one way I can do it is just by adding value outside of myself, not being concerned about what's in it for Mike, but how can I help Kafaru? How can I help Aaron? How can I help Born Primitive? Like, what work can I do to help you? And then once I started worrying about adding value outside of myself, the value started coming back to me tenfold. um, Jobs started opening up, companies started approaching me, like that one little attitude or mental attitude shift or perspective of what's in it instead of worrying about what's in it for me. How can I help you? Kind of changing that narrative when someone approaches me with something, that kind of changed everything. And then gratitude, like gratitude's something I've been really trying to practice probably the last few months, and I'm starting to get a little bit more intentional about it. But just being grateful to be where I am and have the people that I have in my life, that perspective has changed so much for me. And I don't know, I don't want to get too woo woo, but I mean, there's the universe. You call it the universe, call it God, call it what you will, but it takes notice when you're living life like that, and things just start to come back to you. So
Sure. Yeah, it becomes more than, some would deem it as luck,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah. Man, first off, thank you. Like the whole thing of like beyond the cast, it's what we're trying to go is like deeper into people's stories, stuff like obviously you're a funny guy, charismatic, being connected with the people you're connected, you're rolling with you're with the Joneses and all that. But I've noticed this shift, and a few times over the conversations that we've had, like through, after it was Cody's hunt, we talked
hmm
about his moose hunt, and I was getting ready to go do my moose hunt in Utah. We had a brief conversation, and I gotta say, man, like I have so much respect for, people that, go through some stuff and then they can come out of it and they can just be transparent. And I appreciate it because
yeah,
you've always been very transparent with me, like over the phone. That's why I wanted you on here, because I admire that. And I would encourage you to keep doing the work. But you talked about, gratitude, that you're trying to practice gratitude. How do you practice gratitude? Like because I'm just saying, like, most people don't, they're like, well, that's cool. He practices it, but like, what is he doing? Like, because I think that could be something that someone could walk away from.
yeah. So I'm kind of I'm new in actually practicing it, but I try to catch myself lately. I try to catch I'm gonna start journaling. Can't believe I just said that out loud. But
I can
I'm
get
gonna
you a
start
journal.
I'm gonna start
We'll
journaling.
get Aiden to get you one before you leave.
Yeah.
And it's cool.
But I'm gonna start journaling. So it's been something I've been kind of feeling into. But man, like there's so many times where you're stuck in traffic and you just get pissed off about it and you're like, F bomb this, like,
I
and
don't know what you're talking about.
yeah, I'm trying to shift that right now. Like that's one example I can think of, but just being grateful for the opportunities I have. And like a friend of mine, she brought up that she's been waking up in the morning and really like intentionally, not looking at her phone and just thinking about three things she's grateful for. And not just like, oh, I'm grateful for Santino, my house, and a paid heat bill, right? Like actually feeling it, like intentionally feeling into the things that you're grateful for and feeling what you feel inside for whatever it is that those three things that you choose, you're going to be grateful for just to start the day. So, um, that's a practice I've been recently trying to incorporate into my mornings. But yeah, journaling is I think going to be the next step. So
Is that well, do you listen to podcasts?
I do. Yep.
Andrew Huberman was talking about that, like setting a 15-minute timer and just journaling. Like
Oh no.
it
Yeah.
could be whatever. Like one journal day might not, it might just be your rant, right?
Yep.
It might be something that you just need to release and get out. Um, One of the things that well, I did cold exposure therapy, like when I was doing stuff like back in the day when I boxed and, when we ran our gyms, always would try to jump in a cold shower anytime. But like the whole ice thing, it's just a pain in the ass to refill those tubs and do all that. We work with a brand, Morosco Forge, where they get and they're not a sponsor of this, by the way, but it's a really cool tub that they have that like filtrates itself. And that's been a huge practice because I have access to it now, that like, even if I'm like really pissed off or like maybe there's something that's like bothering me emotionally, you jump in that and it like will reset you like 100%. You could be injured and have pain, and you jump in that, and for the 2 minutes that you're in it, it'll take that pain away. And those are physical practices, but those are also like things that I've, to echo what you're saying. Like I've been working on a lot of different practices like that, because like a lot of the things that you're talking about, Mike, I would feel like if you did read some of my journal stuff that I've written down, like, we are in so much alignment, brother, in so many different ways
Yeah.
with, having that sense of entitlement stuff or whatnot. But I think ever since I hired Aiden and made him a partner in our media company, like it's not just about me, and I'm trying to like I've taken a pay cut so he can make more and do all the stuff, but it like works. And like you said, it comes back tenfold. So I think with anything that you do, having alignment with starting your day right, trying to have the right mentality. It's impossible to do that every single day, but like the fact that you're trying to keep that in front of you all the time, I think is super powerful. And I think that's a lot of guys are tapping into that. But I don't want to say this is a rant, but I see a lot of people go to like conferences or they have these men camps or whatever, which is great. But then what happens after not even 72 hours, let's say a month, 30 days after that camp, is the change still there? Right. And you know this more probably than most because you're in the military. Like it takes 30 days to start something like a habit.
Yeah.
And then just try to keep doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it. So what would you say to like some of the guys that are in that spot? I was going to say younger guys, but I think there's older guys that are in that spot right
I
now.
didn't get here till I'm 35 now, almost 36,
You're still young.
and I'm just figuring it out. Right. So,
but what is it like? You said that you didn't have that aha moment, but I always feel like one of the things that my mom would always say to me when I was younger and I hated it, she goes, "You are who you hang out with." Right. And I think that if I may, I think you and I both have like a heart for people. So like, even when you see something that maybe might not be, if someone shows you a part of themselves that might not be great, you want to honor that, keep it confidential. But if you're constantly exposed to that, and it's the same thing over time, right? You're basically walking into the same bar with the same song, same group, whatever.
yep.
Nothing ever changes. So like, what is it, or what would you encourage somebody that's maybe in that spot to like say, I gotta make a difference?
Yeah. I mean, so I've had a lot of people kind of reach out to me. I don't love social media. I don't love talking to my phone, but the times that I have been transparent on there and like talked about some of my struggle with alcohol or my mentality or whatever, the times I've been kind of vulnerable on there and do what feels to me kind of is like the talking head thing. I don't know a better word for it. I think it's gay. Um, so, but the times that I've done it, I've had guys reach out to me and be like, "Hey man, like that inspired me. Like, can I get some more tips or can I talk to you about, I'm thinking about quitting alcohol. I think I drink too much." But it's really hard to get people to, and you probably know this better than anybody from being a father. You can tell the boys not to touch the stove. It's hot, but until they touch the stove and find out for themselves if it's hot, they're going to do it. Right. Like,
Oh yeah.
Same thing with like drinking and driving, or you name something that people know they shouldn't do, but they still do it. So people got to want to make a change first. But Yeah, without them wanting to make a change, like it's hard to give any advice, but if you want to make a change, you got to just kind of you got to one stop being a pussy because the reason I stayed in the friend groups I stayed in and the reason I hung out with the crowd I hung out with and the reason I changed who I was or tried to fit in, maybe because I didn't know who I was, but the reason I tried to fit in with those groups was because I was a pussy and there's comfort in numbers, right? It's comfortable to be accepted. Um, so you really gotta kind of man up if you're gonna go on that path because I didn't know who was gonna be around after I left, but I didn't give a fuck because it was time to I knew that it was time to kind of change the way I was living. It was time to kind of back out of it. And then, when the dust settled, I still had really good people around. And furthermore, a year and a half later from me making that change in my life, not only do I have really good people around, but more good people are coming into my life, right?
I
Like
see
I'm
that.
connecting on a deeper level with guys like you. Like a year and a half ago, I wouldn't have been sitting across this table with you. You know what I mean? Even if this table was here a year and a half ago,
It was a passion project.
yeah, but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
If
yeah.
this thing was up and rolling, you wouldn't have been like, I want that guy up here because I'd have been just a fucking idiot. So yeah, so a year and a half removed from alcohol and kind of trying to. Everyone's got an ego. I've got an ego, and when I catch it starting to get out of control, I just kind of try to reel myself back in, and that's when I really like. All right, I need to be. I need to go back to. I need to humble myself. I need to be grateful for what I have. I need to be grateful for the relationships I have, and that's kind of how I recenter my compass or correct my azimuth. But yeah, a year and a half removed, like the people that are coming into my life are amazing, like amazing freaking humans,
Yeah.
all the way around. And if they're not an amazing human, they're probably not going to be in my life, or you know what I mean. I don't want to say they have to add value to me, but they've got to be good humans and aligned. Like alignment with people is huge. So, um,
Well, I'll say this again, like, man, I see through your social media, and even though like some of the stuff that you said, I get it. Like you're this military guy, so you're hanging out with all these like tough dudes. So like to be vulnerable, like looks weak, or whatever.
yeah,
You or to talk about your feelings.
yeah,
I got to a place in my life where I had no choice because if not, I was going to lose my life. And at some point, it's like I got to remember, like, well, what got me here? And I remember feeling overlooked, not feeling validation, like even in my own home, right? Like, but
hmm
personally, but especially in some of the workplaces. And I think what's great about hunting and what's great about some of the stuff that we're talking about is that there's this, like, if you go do what I would call like a pretty serious hunt, like in Alaska, where when you get dropped off, you're there. Like no one's fucking coming to get you. Like,
nope,
and if they do and you're hurt, you're probably not going to make it. Like by the time they get there logistically, if you're
yeah,
really, hurt, like you're going to be in really bad shape or you're not going to make it. I think that the it takes a village. And I think sometimes we forget that. And there's some great stories out there in every different industry. In ours, there's a few. Like I see what Cam's doing. We talk about Cam or Levi Morgan. For people that don't know who Levi Morgan is, hands down one of the best archers, 3D shooters in the world. Great guy. But it's one of those things that, you see the success and where they started, but like even Levi's story with how he was, I don't want to say born into it, but born into it. And Samantha, his wife, like they grew up, that they met shooting 3D shoots together. Like that's an incredible story, but that's not going to be my story. It's not going to be your story, but that's an incredible story. And
hmm
that's part of the herd that goes into, what I would call this community of hunting. I think that because of the same type of, resemblances like from the military and hunting, like, hey, this is a tough guy thing and you got to be this and we're not going to talk about this. And people can say whatever they want about me, like that's fine. I know this more than ever, that if we don't find unity and transparency and like just let stuff go, like thank God I'm not the Santino that I was when I was 25 years old.
yeah,
Like I wouldn't be here doing this. I wouldn't have any of the stuff that I'm like that, but I'm so happy that I've been pulled from that, and I see that you're in your story, I'm hearing, you're being called to do something. Right. And that's a big term. And like in the military, you're called to do
Mhm.
something. For me, it's a spiritual term, but at the same time, man, I really, I'm just like, I'm excited to see what you do after the military. But like one of the things that was really cool today, how great was that you were texting me and you're in a helicopter
Yeah, yeah.
like 3 hours ago.
It would have been great if I had warmer clothes on, but yeah. I mean, that's
I
a
still want
perfect
you to ice
example.
bath after this is
Yeah,
over.
I got shorts. All
All
right,
right.
we'll send it. Screw it.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, one of my guys he re-enlisted indefinite, so this is last re-enlistment of his career. Indefinite means the Army owns him until he reaches his retention control point, or
What does that mean?
retention control point is the maximum amount of time you can stay in the military at the rank you're at.
Got it.
So for him, it's like, I think 24 or 26 years, and he's only at 15 or 16 years. So they could keep him for a while, or until you hit 20 and you submit a retirement packet and it gets approved, because the retirement has to be approved. So you can't, like when I hit 20 years, if we're at war and we're losing people left and right, like I could submit my packet to retire at 20 years and they can deny it, and I got to continue to serve. So, so that's what indefinite means, is there's no more expiration of your term of service. You belong to Uncle Sam indefinitely.
Got it.
So,
Got it.
that was his indefinite reenlistment. So we hopped on a Chinook, a CH-47. That, for those of you that don't know, it's a helicopter with the 2 rotors, big windy, and flew up into the mountains and got him out on the ramp and held the flag up, and he took his oath of enlistment for the last time. So
Can I put some of those pictures up?
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
I'll put them up on
Yeah.
this that you sent. I'll keep them.
I'll send you more. I'll send you pictures.
But
of
with
them.
that, like, aside, like, you do the service a great, like our country a great service, and like we're thankful for that. But like some of the stuff that you get to do, like what you're doing today, is pretty amazing.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's cool.
That has to change perspective too.
It does. It does. But, I was thinking about it when my feet were dangling out of the bird and I was sending you the picture. I'm like, this is cool, but that's not every day, right? That's one time this year that I get to do that, and it's because of the job I put myself in, so that my job is an office job. I'm a general manager, if you will, is basically, or a GM or a COO, if you will. And I manage 70 something people, and we get a task done. It's not a combat organization. It's a training organization, but I put myself in that job because it's an office job and it's got Wi-Fi, and it allows me to start building on my career outside of the military. So I can do the social media management for Born Primitive. So I kind of stepped away from all the sexy, cool guy stuff. And this is another good perspective change. And I get it refreshed often. I've got buddies that are in 75th Ranger Regiment, right? They're parachuting out of helicopters, and they're flying on helicopters all the time. They're shooting exotic weapons. They're still going overseas and doing the Lord's work on classified operations. And one of my good friends is in that organization. And every time I talk to him, he tells me what he's doing. And then I tell him, I start feeling bad. I'm like, well, I'm just a deputy commandant at an NCO academy. And he's like, bro, you're living my dream right now, as far as like the hunting industry and all of that stuff goes. So it comes with sacrifices. There's give and take. I could still be doing that, right? And that would be cool, but I wouldn't be here with you right now, right? I wouldn't have went to 4 different TAC events last year. I wouldn't have a little bit of an extra income source and starting to learn marketing from some really smart people in the hunting industry if I was still in that lifestyle, because I wouldn't have time for it. So,
Right. But you also said earlier that you completely changed everything so you could be here in Colorado, so you could elk hunt.
yeah, I
Right.
did. Yeah.
So like this year you went on some pretty cool hunts. You went with Cody, and he had a moose. You went on his moose hunt. You shot a big bull opening day
Big bull opening day. Biggest bull
Lance?
of my career. Yep.
with Lance.
Yeah.
What did he score?
He's 330. Take some deductions out, but he's a 330-ish bull.
Yeah. So
Maybe
for
a
people
little
that don't
less.
know, like scoring animals, obviously, like if you're able to harvest an age class animal, there's a level of measurements that determine what the size of that animal
Mm.
is. And, aside from like taking all the meat and all that, so, the part of the benefit is having antlers and stuff. You see, like the antler lamp that I built over there with
Yep.
sheds that I found. Like antlers are cool. And when you get to hang them up and do all that, well, and then, so then you went on Cody's moose hunt. And then did you go on a sheep hunt too?
We went on the sheep hunt first. So, yep. So killed the biggest bull in my career over the counter, which I didn't think it was happening. Like I didn't opening day. And then I saw that bull and then I was like, there's no way this is happening. And then it happened. And I was like, all right, I'll take it. I'll take it. So already on cloud 9, then we went out on Cody's sheep hunt 2 or 3 days later. And Cody, for those of you that don't know, Cody Covey's an epic human and hunter, and he needs to book an appointment to get the horseshoe surgically removed from his ass because this guy's already killed the big 3 in Colorado. He's only lived here for 13 years. So he drew bighorn sheep and moose in the same year. I remember I was in the airport flying to an event when he called me and told me he drew the moose tag, or he texted me and I called him because I didn't want to text it to him because I didn't want him to take it the wrong way. And I was like, I'm having a hard time being happy for you right now because I knew he already had the sheep tag.
Right.
Like I'm having a real hard time being happy for you right now because I was trying to draw, I don't care. I was trying to draw unit 49 at 6 points. So I had a % chance of drawing it and I didn't draw it
for archery elk.
Yep. And so all these years of striking out in the draw, and then he gets a moose and a sheep tag in the same year. So I was having a hard time being happy for him, but went on the bighorn hunt. I brought my camera along. I was like, I didn't plan on elk hunting. So call it what you will. Maybe it was probably a lot of luck. There's always luck in elk hunting, but I didn't even plan on buying a tag till after Cody killed his sheep and his moose. Cause I was like, I'm all in on those. It took him 13 years to draw those tags. Like I'm there for those hunts over my own, like just being there and experiencing those. I might not ever get to experience those hunts. Right.
For sure.
So, but then we grabbed a tag, killed a bull, went on the sheep hunt, killed a sheep. First hour of light, opening morning, they found a sheep that the night before, and where we found the sheep, we were up there a couple weeks before, and all we'd seen were banana horns. We hadn't seen any big rams or any shooter rams, and Cody had probably definitely saw over 50% of the sheep in that unit. So, to kill that right off first morning. So we had 6 days worth of food, had to hike the sheep meat down. I was like, all right, well, I didn't even eat my first day's worth of food yet.
Right.
And so we packed out and then regrouped a few days later for his moose hunt. And then same thing, didn't happen in the morning. We were a little upset with Cody about that because he's the first morning king at this point, right?
Yeah.
And, but he shot a massive Shiras moose the first evening of that hunt. That was a 20-mile day.
Was that an archery hunt?
Archery, yep.
Right.
So the sheep hunt was a rifle hunt. I talked him into that because I work with a rifle company and I needed to get photos. Yep. So I work with Bagar. I need to get photos. I didn't have any rifle hunts, and sheep hunting is not easy. And bow hunting them is really not easy. So I was like, you got both these tags. How about we kill the sheep with a rifle, and then we can bow hunt the shit out of the moose tag. And that's what we did. And he killed a great moose. And
well, I saw the photos, not just a great moose, like book moose. Once he gets it looked at, thing
might be. I don't know if it might be top 5 biggest Shiras moose ever killed with a bow.
Yeah, might be. Well, definitely in the state for sure.
Yeah, it's a big moose.
Yeah, giant. And like when I saw the pictures, I couldn't believe it. So for people that are listening, for a guy to draw a sheep tag and a moose tag in the same state on the same year, that's most of those tags are once in a lifetime. After you draw it, you're not even allowed to even re-put in for, is it 5 years or 3 years?
I think I don't know. I've never drawn one. We'd have to ask Cody.
Yeah. So I'll ask him. I want to have him on and I want him to play something. But anyways, one of those, so like to draw that is very sacred. And there are a lot of guys like I want a once in a lifetime moose hunt in Utah. And there were guys that we met. I think the youngest guy besides myself, almost 70 years old. They put in for 30, 40, they're over 30 points, which means 30 years that you've been putting in. And I went in at the Western Hunt Expo and am excited, but also like recognize how significant that is, right? So I'm sure Cody, like to win a sheep tag and the moose tag in the same state, like that'll never happen again,
No.
right? Like that's like 0.0001 chance.
And I don't think that we couldn't recreate that season, like last season, if that none of that season will ever happen again. Monster Bowl opening day for me with my bow in an over the counter unit. Uh, Sheep first morning of the hunt, moose first day of the hunt. Like no way all those stars line up like that ever again. So
Well, and one of the things I'll let Cody speak for himself, but I'll share a little bit of this. Cody expressed to me, I think it was like 2 years ago, I bumped into him that he had some transformation stuff, good positive
oh yeah,
transformation stuff in his life. And then we hear your story. And again, the things that we're passionate about, the things that we put our time into, look what happened to you this year. You opening day with Lance, hammer a, incredible bull, and then the rest of the season just continues to play out. Like I don't ever look at those things by chance. I always look at like success is like it meets those with or it's like success is when opportunity meets or chance meets opportunity. I'm completely butchering it right now, but
mm-hmm.
I'll put it out and get it right. But it's when you put in the work and you're doing all these things and then the stars align,
Yeah,
or whatever you want to call it. You get blessed or however you want to look at it. But I think it's great. And I'm really excited about the journey that you're on. So 2 years go by, the next 2 years pass by, and then you decide, obviously you have this landscape that you're trying to figure out where you want to be, what you're wanting to do. But like, if you could write that now, which you're going to start journaling, what does that look like? What would you like to do?
so that's what I'm trying to figure out. I think right now the plan has been for the last, I mean, since I met Aaron, I think the reason Aaron and I got along so well and clicked immediately is when I met him, he was trying to give me a bunch of free shit, and that's what he does. He like gives he gives a lot. Like he gets a lot in the hunting industry as far as sponsorships, all that stuff, but he'll give you the shirt off his back if you ask for it.
Literally.
Or you don't have to ask for it and he's just trying to give it to you. Like Snyder, put your shirt on. Like he's a very, very generous man. And he was giving me a backpack to use. And I was like, this is great, but what I'd really like is a job after the military. Uh, History of me and Kafaru. I'd seen my first Kafaru pack in 2008 when I was a brand new soldier. It's too poor to buy one. I think that was before Aaron was even there. A bunch of guys I was overseas with were using them. A little bit more senior ranking guys were buying them and using them. So I'd been exposed to Kafaru early in my military career, and then as I got into hunting as a light infantryman, I wear a backpack for a living. So I've worn literally just about every backpack on the market, and Kafaru's it. Like I wear backpacks for a living, and the modularity of it, the adjustability, like that's the bag for me. So, um, I asked him for a job. So I think what I'm going to, I don't know what I'll do when I get up there, but he has a job for me. Stuff could happen in 2 years, but I feel like I've secured a seat at the table up there. So, I think that's where I'm going to end up going. Colorado is great and amazing, but it's expensive and it's getting crowded. So
For sure.
and I grew up in a small town, so I kind of want to go back to small town roots. And after visiting Riverton a couple times, like the people at the company are amazing. And it's going to be nice to have a sense of community again, like a small town. I was up there teaching a class with Aaron, and we were it's like a truck stop diner because it's the only breakfast joint in town because that's how small it is. And man, we walked in there. I think it was Mother's Day when we were in there. Man, we were the only ones that didn't say hi to everybody in the restaurant and know everyone by their first name, And that's got its downsides too. But man, when shit hits the fan or you really need help, like having that sense of community in a whole town, it's pretty freaking cool.
Right.
And it's the way I grew up. So
For sure. Well, what is we're going into 2024. It's almost Christmas here in like 3 weeks,
Yep.
but like next year, for people that are you going to be at all the TAC events? Like what's kind of on the schedule for like the fun part of like, let's say not non-hunting events?
yeah, So I'm gonna be probably at what is the new one that
The
Phil
Mile
started?
High.
Mile High Hunt Expo. Is that it?
Yep.
Yep. So I'll probably be at Mile High Hunt Expo at the Kafara booth and kind
That's
of
here in Colorado it's at the Gaylord.
Gaylord.
Yep.
Yep. At the Gaylord. Good job, Phil. Way to bring one home for us. Uh, that's cool. I was like, why we got to go to Salt Lake to go to a Western hunting show? We're in Colorado. More people come west, more non-residents come out here than they do any other state. That's a whole different topic. We don't love that, but it is what it is.
We need the revenue.
We need the revenue. So I'll probably go to that. I'll be at Western Hunt Expo with Born Primitive. I think we're sharing a booth with Kafaru. We're right next door to each other. And then haven't really lined out the TAC events, but I'll be at least at one or two Total Archery Challenge events. And then, yeah.
And then
who
if
knows?
people want to find you on social Instagram, it's at Mike Herne.
Yep. Mike_Herne, Herne, the E silent.
I know. Sorry, man. I know. My bad.
But yeah. But yeah, pretty easy to find.
Well, thanks for coming on. I love watching your, the transformation and just like the journey that you're on. I think like one of the biggest things, like, and I'm becoming more appreciative of this. Might sound weird for some people, but like, I really like watching people like laugh and smile. I have a hard time with that. I feel like some of the times that I've laughed and smiled, I've been like pretty intoxicated.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't want to have intoxication to just like feel happy. Right. But I'm kind of a serious person anyways. Right. Until we start talking hunting or I start talking about my passions, but everything that I've seen from you, like all positive, man. I commend you on like, thank you for your service and everything. Thank you for showing up today after your busy day and then having to drive back down south. But I really appreciate you and it's fun to watch your journey, man. So thanks.
Thank you so much for having me and letting me tell a little bit of the story.
Yeah, well, I'd love to do it again. I'm hoping that this takes off. And again, more than anything, it's really just trying to pull back those layers. Like I think everybody has a story. And I think that because of the way that we operate, like COVID and all these other political things that can, we could spend a whole nother hour talking about that crap, but I think it's just a waste of time. Like people forget to like sit across from a table, like have a drink with somebody or whatever, and just have a real authentic conversation. That's what the hope of this is. And, through the platforms we put it on, that they'll listen and hear your story and maybe grab something from it. I for sure do. And I hope whoever's listening can as well.
Me too. Yeah.
Thanks, brother.
Thanks.